Chapter 6, Zane. I looked down at my message crystal. Princess Flyer. I wondered if she was going to argue with the decision to keep things separate. She definitely struck me as the type. I didn't know her personally, but she was obviously from one of the noble houses. How high or prestigious? No idea, but she carried herself with an incredibly thick sense of decorum. Her sword technique was flawless, disciplined, and efficient, and even though she was using an avatar anonymizer, she couldn't fully hide her bearing or the way she interacted with others. The first time I saw her, she'd shown up with a full entourage, like some kind of military procession. Had to be from one of the martial families. Her sword style was too distinct, and the way her mana operated, at least partly self-governed, was definitely out of the ordinary these days. Most people leaned heavily on system assistance. She didn't seem to need it. Zane, Mira's voice broke through my thoughts. We've got to get in line. The naming ceremony's about to start. I nodded and stood, following the stream of students into the arcane emporium, the place where our natural proclivities, personality traits, and system integration would be tested. It was a massively magical structure that used the full breadth of the system and dove deep into the participants. Once complete, we'd receive our initial stat profiles and a few tailored options for future progression paths. Eva, don't think I'm just going to let some foreign system start poking around in my code. Her voice chirped in my ear. Ava, they've got another thing coming. Honestly, they're lucky if I don't firebomb the whole thing. I shook my head. Eva, we have to play nice, remember? Things are supposed to be a secret. Yeah, about that. We should probably talk about why I have to be a secret again. Because most people don't have an AI companion with your personality. Cheeky brilliance, you mean? I mean chaotic energy. You're a blessing, Eva, but also a curse. Rude. You are being so mean to me today. I could hear the pout in her voice. Listen, I am sorry, Eva. Just please make sure you lock down what needs to be locked down. If the system gets a read on me, it could be a problem. Which is why I need you to not let them see your real stats. Got it? So what do I get in return? I sighed. My eternal gratitude? Not good enough. What do you want? You're taking me on a date this afternoon. You're the only system I know that demands dates. I have needs, Zane. Fine. Just handle the masking protocol. I don't want anyone finding anything weird. You do realize you'll have to showcase at least some of your skills, right? Otherwise, you risk losing your scholarship and access to resources. I know. I'll reveal what I have to, hoping to keep it to Stonewake for now, then we'll see. The arcane emporium was massive vaulted ceilings, glowing glyphs, and a subtle hum of mana that filled the space like a living current. But it wasn't just mana. There was divine power here too. You could feel it woven through the structure itself, likely embedded during its creation by the church or a high-ranking priestess. Divine power was rare. You couldn't just study your way into it. It required a contract or a bloodline inheritance. Even if someone wasn't devout, once a blessing was given, it couldn't be taken away. And let's face it, divine beings didn't seem too picky goddesses, divine beasts, spirits. All had made pacts in the past. I'd never heard of a direct contract with a goddess, but that didn't mean it hadn't happened. Maybe that explained why the Emporium system was so good at passing fate threads during naming. We moved through one of the portal rings and into the main chamber, talking idly as we waited for our turn. I'd love to be an arcane caster, Elaine said, glancing at her crystal. Flexible, powerful, and if the build works, I could even slot in divine healing as a subroutine if I can find a contract or tablet binding. I want to focus on glyph work, Mira added. Lifestyle magic, you know? Stuff that improves people's lives without needing to be on the front lines. Kyle looked thoughtful. Monster hunting's more my thing. Maybe a spear path or something with a naginata. I love blade work, but I'd rather face monsters than people. I nodded silently. That made sense. They didn't know I'd already killed. Fighting people and fighting monsters were two very different beasts. Monsters followed instincts, dungeon rules, patterns you could study and exploit. But people lied, faked, cheated. That was actually the main difference between mercenaries and adventurers. One dealt with mortal threats, while the other dealt with more systemic ones. Where it got really complicated was monsters that acted like mortals. A Death Knight, for example, wasn't just a monster. It used to be a man. It remembered tactics, sword forms, spells. That was something else entirely. The three of them turned to me. "You all know what I want to be," I said with a half smile. "Just a basic swordsman. That's enough for me." Kyle rolled his eyes. "Vain in your sword, humble in your words." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Remind me again, how does the stat system work? I know you've all messed with it more than I have." I turned toward the incoming staging zone and answered quietly, "It's layered. The first scan identifies your baseline physical, cognitive, mana alignment, everything. Then it matches those to your psychological imprint and potential affinities. Based on that, it recommends integration paths, what traits to strengthen, what classes to try, how to allocate your growth points." "And then we pick?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Then you pick, but that's just the start. Once you commit, the real training begins." Chapter 7, Zane. My friend and I slowly made our way through the line at the Arcane Emporium. There were pretty major ruckuses as people received unique classes and potential builds. It was all smoke and mirrors, though. Just about anyone could learn anything. It was a world where paths were so regulated that a particular class dictated your entire direction in life. Though some people wanted to treat it that way. Kyle nudged me. "You're up, dude. See you on the other side." We fist-bumped and started walking toward the hall I was assigned to. I found the simulator chamber easily enough. A smooth, black glyph circle pulsed faintly on the floor, radiating a cool, almost sterile manner. Two attendants with spirit glass tablets watched me, looking bored as they tapped out instructions. One of them sounded irritated as she explained, "This is one of the most advanced arcane artifacts in all of the kingdom, part divine construct. Basically, a spirit dungeon meets a dream-forged combat chamber. It's designed to be personalized and adaptive. Just act, move, and be what you naturally are." I smiled at her. Her eyes went a bit wide, and she quickly looked away. I didn't have any questions. I'd read the specs. Most students just saw it as a fancy training room, but I knew better. This thing was powerful and could give insight and direction for most. I needed it not to see me too clearly. I stepped onto the glyph circle and the faint hum intensified. A scan washed over me, a brief tingling sensation that my system recognized as an attempt to lock onto my mana signature. Eva, ever present, masked it, weaving her own subtle counterpulses through my core. "System, welcome user, Zane Myles. We've experienced some interference, recalculating. Expected challenge rating being upgraded based on perceived competency and declared intent. Initiating environment construction." The air around me shimmered, walls dissolving into a rippling veil like standing inside a crystal lit from within. The floor beneath my feet shifted, reforming into the uneven crumbling ground of a canyon battlefield. Rune nodes, dark and inert for now, were embedded in the jagged rock formation's bonus objectives for more ambitious applicants. Not me. My declared intent was simple. Martial applicant, standard blade. Nothing flashy. Nothing that hinted at unusual abilities. My goal wasn't to impress. It was to gain access to combat class resource pools, weapons, relics, advanced training chambers with minimal attention. I needed just enough show to maintain scholarship eligibility and a chance to test if the underlying system could detect or interfere with my unique attributes. Good Lord, you cannot even say it to yourself. Shut up. We both know there are those that can pick at thoughts. He could feel the eye roll. Just remember, no system alarms, no one watching. We go at 40%, Eva, I murmured, my voice lost in the ambient hum of the simulator. You're such a tease, Zane. Let's just go all out. Bring out Manifest and really give them a show. You know what will happen if we do that. You're so boring. Find a way to hide a bit longer. I have you more to myself anyway. A faint smirk tugged at my lips. Eva always had to have the last word. A holographic prompt materialized before me. You are being assessed as unlinked. No known class path. Martial intent confirmed. Begin. The message vanished, and from the shifting dust of the canyon floor, a figure coalesced. A swordsman appeared, a blade-bound construct, shimmering with faint mana light, its movements precise, artificial. A Tier 2-3 combat simulation with strangely high stats for their tier. My opponent moved with the advanced training of a knight officer. Nothing flashy, solid mana method and footwork. But it was too basic in its execution, easily read, even if I wasn't applying any of my flashy swordsmanship. Still, it was a fun battle. I found myself enjoying it. The uneven ground, broken platforms, and pockets of magic-disruptive fields were designed to test coordination. My objective: defeat it in under 3 minutes without magical aid beyond the standard mana reinforcement of a martial style with only a 10% mana application. That shouldn't bring too much attention. I engaged, falling into a restrained version of my Stonewake style, the first of my 7 styles. It focused on defense and control, prioritizing brutal efficiency and grounded movements. My father's words echoed, "If you can stand, you can fight. If you can fight, you can live." It looked like basic, unpolished swordsmanship, nothing to raise any eyebrows. I didn't unleash any of my special abilities, but found the battle a bit too easy for my liking. The construct was fast, its blade hard and unyielding. It moved with the cold logic of an AI, predicting my parries, forcing me to adapt. I absorbed blows with reinforced forearms, countered with low, practical sweeps, always maintaining my footing on the unstable terrain. Sweat slicked my brow, but my breathing remained even. This was a dance I knew, a familiar grind. Then a subtle shift. Eva's internal hum tightened. Anomaly detected. Simulator is adjusting parameters. Probability of host holding back rated at 78%. Ramping difficulty. They were poking the bear. I felt the mana-disruptive fields intensify around the edges of the arena. My mana cloak flickered, briefly struggling to maintain its seamless flow. Just as I pushed the construct back with a series of heavy defensive blows, it dissolved. In its place, coalescing from a shimmering glyph etched into the ground, a new opponent materialized. A glyph-marked Phantom Knight, closer to Tier 4 I estimated. Its spectral blade shimmered, and its movements were eerily fluid. It began using time-skip parries, phasing in and out of reality, and even launching spirit projections to flank me. I didn't change my style, but I did add a heavier application of soul force, mana, to the blade, sharpening its resonance and causing more feedback to the construct. Eva's voice, a tight whisper in my mind, cut through the sounds of combat. "They're poking the bear. You sure you want to keep this clean? One wrong move, and I'm on every watch list in the kingdom. I don't have time for that. Not with Jordan and Lily, and not while I'm still trying to figure, well, you know." I muttered, gritting my teeth as I dodged a time-skipped thrust that appeared where I had been a fraction of a second before. "Let's play this slow." I shifted my stance, adapting from the pure defense of Stonewake. I subtly channeled World Veil energy, not enough to manifest outwardly, but just enough to push past the increased resistance, to enhance my reflexes, to predict the Phantom Knight's next appearance. It was a risk, a whisper of something beyond conventional mana, but it was safer than exposing a core. I pushed the advanced forms of Stonewake, hoping to avoid any of my other styles. I made quick ground with the Phantom. The Phantom Knight was relentless, its glyph-marked blade constantly shifting, trying to find an opening. I moved, a blur of controlled evasion, making my blade an extension of my intent to simply not be hit. When it phased behind me, I didn't turn fully. Instead, I let my blade go, a mana-sheathed arc that spun from my grip, catching its spectral form. A controlled mana explosion technique, a pulse of contained energy, detonated from my palm, pushing the blade deeper into the Phantom as it shimmered. The blade returned to my hand, and the phantom knight stumbled, briefly losing its ethereal cohesion. With 30 seconds left on the timer, I found my opening. A faint high, then a grounded pivot, bringing my blade down not with raw power, but with controlled precision, splitting the phantom knight down the middle. It dissolved into shimmering motes of light, and the arena's hum shifted back to normal. Challenge cleared. Time, 2:58. Efficient, tactically aware, possibly underranked, granting access to Tier 2 martial resources. I wiped sweat from my brow, forcing my breathing to stay calm. Possibly underranked. That was the perfect outcome. Just enough to gain access, not enough to demand a full investigation. As I stepped off the glyph pad, an instructor, a portly man with tired eyes, glanced at the console. He saw the flagged footage, then dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Just a well-trained commoner hiding nerves," I heard him mumble to a nearby assistant. The glyph flickered, lines resolving into clear numbers. System scan complete. Strength, agility, 51, vitality, 39, intelligence, 44, willpower, 48, charisma, 32, perception, 46, mana capacity, 18, divine compatibility, low. Recommended path, martial adept, basic blade discipline. I exhaled. "This is perfect, good, nothing flashy," Eva's voice whispered in my ear. Nothing true either.
Chapter 8, Aurelia. I was trying to ignore Sword Wannabe. I was successful for the most part during the first few days of classes. I wasn't trying to be cruel or anything. It's just that I'm damn near a princess. I couldn't come across as too eager. That wouldn't be very noble-like. But I couldn't help but think about it. It pissed me off. He did flirt with me. He did look at my legs. Not in a creepy way. Not in a way that was unwelcome. Just in that infuriating, casual, distracted swordsman kind of way. Like he didn't even realize he was doing it. The big jerk. And then he had the audacity to not say anything afterward. No smug grin. No awkward compliment. Just that maddening little nod of acknowledgement. Like I was the one who had stared too long. I crossed my arms, looked the other way, and told myself I didn't care. Even though I absolutely 100% definitely did. He had the audacity to refuse an invitation. I wasn't asking him to marry me. Just meet, talk. Maybe we'd hit it off. Maybe we wouldn't. That wasn't the point. The point was I asked, and he turned me down like I was offering him moldy bread and a bad blind date. I'm not used to being told no. Not when I make an effort. Not when I lower my guard just enough to ask. And the worst part? He wasn't rude about it. No arrogance, no mockery. Just that same infuriating calm, like he'd already made peace with it before I even opened my mouth. Which somehow made it worse. I don't chase people. I don't linger. But here I was, replaying the moment in my head like an idiot, wondering if I should have smiled more. Or less. Wondering if he saw it, really saw it, or if I'd just become another forgettable encounter in a long list of would-have-beens. Damn him. And damn me for caring. The moment I stepped into the open-air walkway between spires, the shift hit me. Mana pressure raw, agitated, barely controlled. I quickened my pace. Ciela and the others chattered behind me, but their voices dropped as the tension in the air thickened. Ahead, students had gathered in a wide semicircle. Spells lit the air. Sparks sizzled. Fear hung heavy. I didn't ask. I pushed forward. There were two of them in the center. One boy, clearly an incoming freshman like me, but who looked young, no older than 14, was backed against a pillar. Small. Thin. Spectacles half-cracked. His robe was a low-class issue, faded blue, sleeves too long. He was bleeding from his lip. He didn't even try to cast, just held up his hands as if that would stop it. The other was Corin Drestel. 4th year. Heir to House Drestel and walking proof that power didn't require character. A small crowd of high-blood students flanked him, laughing as he conjured flickers of heat just inches from the younger man's face. "Come on, little nomad," Corin jeered, lifting his wand. "You're in a school for elites. Do you even know what spell compression means? Or are you here to polish our boots?" The boy stammered, trying to speak, but another spark cracked against his shoulder, and he flinched hard. My jaw tightened. My fingers twitched toward my sword. I hate nobles like this. They gave the rest a bad name. Maybe I should give him a beating. It would make me feel better, and Corin could use it. I wasn't given the chance. Another figure stepped into the ring. He moved like no one else there. Handsome. Tall. Silver blue hair and the bluest eyes I've ever seen. Striking. I don't say that about guys very often. His every step was grounded. Balanced. The crowd instinctively parted, not out of respect, out of instinct. His coat was battered, one sleeve frayed. His boots scuffed, not from fashion, but from use. The sword on his back didn't gleam. It was old. Functional. Real. Corin turned with an amused grin. Another low-class loser comes to beg? The newcomer said nothing. Corin's grin widened. You want to make this your problem? His voice was quiet. You already made it mine. He reached behind his back and drew the sword. My breath caught. He didn't draw it like a noble. The smoothness of the movement was almost poetic. The blade cleared the sheath with a whisper. His left hand settled in the air, open, low, a counterbalance. I'd seen that stance before. Felt it crash into my ribcage in Ashglass Arena. Corin arched an eyebrow. Really? You've no crest. I see you have no noble house, and your blade doesn't have any enchantments. How exactly do you plan to beat me? The man with the sword raised an eyebrow. How do I plan to beat you? I plan to hit you repeatedly with my sword. Don't worry, I won't kill you. The man smiled. You are welcome. Then he struck. A mid-tier fire burst quick, dirty, enough to scorch clothes and leave serious burns. It was the kind of spell that usually ended fights in a single cast. The swordsman moved. Not fast. Efficient. One step. A shoulder dip. The spell missed by centimeters and exploded against the courtyard stone, sending heat across the crowd. Corin cursed and launched another, this one arced, trying to catch him mid-dodge. He closed the distance instead. His sword came up not to slash but to strike. The flat hammered against Corin's arm, sending sparks and bones rattling. Corin yelped, staggering back, but not before lashing out with a shock spell point blank. The swordsman took the hit. Electric currents snapped across his shoulder and chest. He gritted his teeth, jaw clenched, and drove his palm into Corin's sternum hard enough to knock the wind from him. Corin stumbled. Then he screamed. The swordsman had twisted the wand from his wrist and cracked it, snapping the focusing crystal. The crowd gasped. Wands weren't cheap. They weren't exactly needed. The system's interface allowed for casting spells directly from one's hands, but wands could help with consistency, mana conservation, and speed of casting. Plus, it was a mark of wealth. Scholarly mages used them. Battle mages did not. Breaking one wasn't just dangerous, it was personal. Corin lunged now, fists clenched, casting raw mana blasts from his open hands like a brawler. The swordsman moved like he'd fought 100 of these guys. Every hit that landed was deliberate. A cut across the thigh, a bash to the ribs, a twist of the wrist. He wasn't showy. He was brutal. And it was working. Corin collapsed after the 6th blow. Face bruised, robe burned, unconscious before his head hit the flagstones. Silence rippled outward. Then someone clapped. It wasn't ironic. It wasn't mocking. It was stunned. A few others joined in, then more. The swordsman didn't acknowledge it. He sheathed his sword and turned toward the younger boy, still shaking near the pillar. He bent down, offered a hand. You okay? The kid nodded, eyes wide. He nodded back and walked away, straight past the crowd, ignoring the whispers. That was when his eyes flicked up, and met mine. For the second time that day, I forgot how to breathe. He didn't stare, didn't frown, just held my gaze for 1 second too, at most, then kept walking, like I was just another face in the crowd. But my heart was pounding, because every movement, every breath, every instinct, it was him. It was Sword Wannabe. I found him. Chapter 9, Aurelia. I stood motionless as the crowd thinned, enchanted sunlight catching in the silver strands of my hair. Voices buzzed nearby, reverent, stunned, giddy, but none of it touched me. My gaze was locked on the space where he'd stood. The way he moved, that particular stance. The subtle tension in his offhand as a counterbalance to his blade. I recognized it. I'd felt that brutal elegance before, haunting me ever since he'd bested me. Sword Wannabe. It couldn't be. Yet it was. This wasn't the Crucible. This wasn't the Ashglass Arena. This was real life. And he was here. I slipped my communicator from my coat pocket. An obsidian slab with a vein of spell steel tracing its edge. It shimmered at my touch, sinking to my mana instantly. "Lacey," I said. "Yes, Lady Aurelia," came the reply, immediate as always. "There was an incident in the eastern courtyard," I stated, my voice cold and clear. "A student fought Corin Drestel. He beat him like the idiot he is. I want his name." "His name?" "Everything," I snapped. "Enrollment file, dorm location, combat class, casting aptitude, realm access logs, everything." Lacey paused. "Understood. I'll escalate and pull public data first. Estimated delivery? 1 hour. I ended the call. Then I turned. A knot of underclassmen still lingered nearby, caught between gossip and awkward reenactments. One boy with emerald-dyed hair and a glow-pulse sash swung an imaginary blade, mimicking the fight in clumsy lunges. He was ridiculous, but he'd witnessed it all. I stepped forward. They noticed me instantly. The energy around them collapsed. Laughter cut off abruptly. The green-haired one straightened like he'd been struck. "Good. Did anyone record it?" I asked. Silence. Then, yeah, I did," the green-haired one blurted, scrambling in his coat. He fumbled out a memory crystal and activated it. The projection flickered to life shaky, imperfect, but undeniably clear. I watched. Not just the strikes or the form. I watched him. The calm. The restraint. The sheer clarity of intent. There was no posturing. No arrogance. He didn't fight for show. He dismantled. And when Corin went down, he didn't gloat. He simply checked on the boy Corin had been harassing, then walked away. Like it was nothing. Like it was routine. "Send it to me," I commanded. The boy synced the file to my communicator with trembling hands. He tanked a shock spell and just cracked Corin's wand. I've never seen anything like it. "Transfer student," someone muttered. "His sword didn't even have a core mod," another observed. It looked like a practice blade. I tuned them out. Their observations were superficial. I needed the deeper truth. My communicator buzzed file received. I opened it again. Slower, frame by frame. I paused on the moment he disarmed Corin. I rewound, watching the way he shifted his weight to absorb the spell instead of dodging. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. A tactical personal choice. He grounded the spell. Through his body. And it worked. My own mana hummed, a thrill of recognition. I tagged the file and sent it to Leora. "This is the one." Then followed it with a second message. "I want everything on him, not just his system file. I want his social record, financial standing, parents living or dead, who he sleeps near, what he eats, favorite colors, realm access history, romantic attachments, anything and everything. If he's even looked at a realm gate, I want to know which one and when." Leora responded instantly. "Understood, this may require private sources." "Then use them," I said, my voice unwavering. I lowered the device, heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. I hadn't been like this in years. I hadn't cared this intensely in years. It wasn't just that he beat one of the High Bloods. That was satisfying, yes. But that wasn't the point. It was the way he made me feel again. The way he had made me feel? Sword wannabe? He made me forget I was Aurelia Vielle Taranis. And that was unacceptable.
Chapter 10. Zane. It had been several days since the semester began. Several days deep into the rhythm of academy life. And this persistent scrutiny certainly was not what I had intended for my time here. So much for keeping a low profile. Only 3 days in, and I was already stepping in to teach stupid nobles a lesson. I didn't regret intervening. That new student, barely a kid, had been one spark away from permanent damage, and Corin, in my opinion, deserved far worse than a mere broken wand. Yet I hadn't anticipated the profound silence that accompanied my movements, or the intense stares. People instinctively parted as I passed, not out of deference, but a palpable wariness. It was as if they couldn't quite decide if I was a nascent hero or simply a dangerous warning. I had never enjoyed being the centre of attention, and certainly not with this level of scrutiny at Corvallis Arcs. By the time I reached the southern tower stairwell, I could still feel the scrutiny, a persistent pressure of curious eyes and hushed whispers. I imagined someone's mana-sensitive quill already sketching a rough outline of my sword, detailing the unlinked anomaly my system supposedly carried. I ducked into the first door I saw, which led into an empty classroom. Tiered seats rose in neat rows, a rune-chalked board stood ready for a lecture, and no instructor was scheduled until afternoon. It offered a blessed silence, the kind that didn't press down but rather lifted a subtle weight from my shoulders. I let the door swing shut behind me, the soft thud of wood against stone muffled by the thick, rune-insulated walls. I moved to the edge of the lowest bench and sat, my elbows resting on my knees, allowing my breath to finally even out. My fingers still carried the phantom buzz of the fight. It wasn't pain, merely an echo, the sort that lingered in your joints after a clean strike. It made my body remember the sequence even before my brain fully processed it. I rolled my shoulders, then rubbed the back of my neck, trying to dislodge the lingering tension. I don't understand why you consistently attempt to blend in, Zane. You are quite clearly the main character. I mean, I personally wouldn't have chosen a shy, brooding individual as a host, but here we are. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly through my nose. Have you ever considered the possibility of shutting up? Every day, Zane. I'm still waiting for a compelling reason to attempt it. I offered no verbal response. I didn't have to. The quiet around me was already growing louder again with the digital hum of incoming notifications. My wrist console buzzed. It was Lila. Her message blinked across the screen. Lila. Jordan's obsessed with dumplings now. Something about he is going to literally die if he's forced to deny this craving. I told him we'd do it for dinner. Love you. I exhaled slowly, a small smile touching my lips as I thumbed the reply field on my console. Zane, still alive. We'll grab dumplings. Tell the goblin he better not have touched my tea stash. I pressed send. The message blinked out, and with it, a small fraction of the tension in my chest eased. Home still existed, and that mattered more than anything. My muscles were still humming from the fight-subtle, low-charge aftershocks sliding through my arms, like my body hadn't quite realized the encounter was over. I started to shift off the bench when my console lit up again. A new ping, then another. Then a rapid scroll of notifications flashed past the corner of my Vision Academy channels. Reposts, reaction clips. The trending hashtags were impossible to ignore. Blade Ghost? Who is this spunk 4th year fall challenge? The Heroinide? Magic 4. Trending. Someone had clipped the entire fight. My counter, the swift disarm, the pregnant pause before Corin slumped in defeat. The footage was still circulating. Already? It hadn't been 20 minutes? I sighed, a long, weary sound. I needed to return to my real work, my classes, my training, the grind that defined my life. This kind of attention was the absolute last thing I needed. Did you hear? Someone muttered behind me as I passed through the inner quad. They say he managed the mana flow himself. His control must be insane not to do it with the system. I heard he broke Drestel's ribcage with a single strike, another whispered, their voice awed. With the flat of the blade. What about his job path? A third voice joined, drawing my attention. Corin is a 4th-year powerhouse, amazing backing, powerful build, and he's a duelist. He should be able to take on a lone first-year swordsman. I snorted. First-year swordsman made it sound like I was some sort of newbie. The term path referred to one's chosen specialization or job at the academy. I believe I already mentioned this, but for those not listening. Paths or jobs like swordmaster, elemental mage, arcane scholar, and battle alchemist existed. Everyone had a path, something their system typically recognized and began to categorize them by. I ducked into my dungeon lore and theory classroom a full 5 minutes early, hoping to grab a corner seat before it filled. The auditorium was already half full. I took a seat in the back. Then she entered. Aurelia Taranis. I had a class with her. I knew it was possible. Everyone, regardless of job class, had to take dungeon lore and theory. It was required for all first years. Her presence filled the room like fresh snowfall, silent, pristine, and utterly impossible to ignore. Her long silver hair shimmered faintly under the enchantment lights of the ceiling. Her expression remained unreadable, her eyes scanning the room for threats she likely didn't expect to find. I watched her cross the room without acknowledging anyone. She sat 2 rows down, dead center. She didn't glance my way, not even once. But I felt something. Warmth. A mana connection? No, that couldn't be right. And yet, something about her made my mana hum at the edges of my skin. A subtle resonance I hadn't felt before. Then the classroom lights dimmed slightly as the lecture interface activated with a low chime. A figure appeared at the front of the hall, stepping up to the edge of the arcane dais. Professor Alden Muir. He looked exactly how I expected someone teaching dungeon lore and theory to look thin, robed, and slightly frayed at the edges, like he hadn't slept in the last 3 dungeon cycles. His eyes were sharp, though too sharp. The kind that catalogued students not by face, but by potential threat level. "Good morning, students," he said, his voice dry as paper and twice as brittle. "I'm Professor Muir. If you've been assigned to my section, congratulations. You've officially committed to never sleeping soundly again." No one laughed. A few nervously adjusted their interfaces. Dungeon lore and theory was predictably dry foundation protocols for anchoring safety glyphs inside unstable pocket dungeons. All theory and no practical application yet. Half the class diligently took notes. The other half stared, captivated, at Aurelia via Taranis. I kept my head down, focusing on the shimmering projection. But the whole time, that subtle feeling, that strange resonance from Aurelia, didn't go away. Class ended without further incident. At least, until the second-year girl with the golden curls intercepted me in the aisle. She was cute, polished, and absolutely sure of herself, the kind of girl who never had to ask twice. "I know we don't really know each other," she began, smiling brightly. "But I saw what you did, and I'd really love to have lunch with you, if you're free." She offered a folded letter-fancy parchment, tied with a ribbon, its edges mana-sealed. I blinked. Every student in earshot fell silent, their attention now riveted on our exchange. I didn't know how to respond. I could feel it again, that familiar knot of pressure behind my ribs. A simple disbelief at the sudden attention. Then, the air shifted and my head turned. Aurelia was still in her seat, her back ramrod straight, her notebook untouched on the desk. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't even looking directly at us. But her mana signature slipped out of her like mist, across cold stone-refined, glacial, and razor-sharp. It was impossible to ignore. Its impact varied, striking differently for everyone. A pair of southern nobles froze mid-stand, their conversation dying in their throats. A social influencer blinked hard, her live stream still running as her stylus clattered to the floor. A girl with thick glasses 1 row up clenched her jaw like she'd just bitten down on static electricity. And the golden-haired girl, her eyes bright, her words halfway out noticed. She stepped back instinctively, her bravado melting under the unseen pressure. "I'll, let you think about it," she mumbled, turning abruptly and vanishing into the stream of students pouring from the room. I stood still, just for a breath. Then I packed my things in silence and walked out. Not a word, not a glance, just the lingering echo of a tension that still hadn't faded. The quad was buzzing again, alive with motion, magic, and the kind of curated chaos only a school like Corvallis Arcs could pull off without collapsing under its own weight. Overhead, spellball teams streaked through the air on rune gliders, trailing bursts of colour as they twisted between glowing goal rings. Down on the green, 4th-year enchanters had conjured a 3-headed illusion cat that prowled through the crowd, barking club advertisements in 6 voices. Mana thread banners floated overhead. Dozens of announcements, job boards, duel schedules, course changes orbited the central plinth in perfect rune-bound sync. Everything pulsed with charm work. Everything shimmered with a little too much polish. Corvallis Arcs wasn't just a university. It was the kingdom's refinement forge, a place that didn't just teach talent. It sharpened it. I crossed the green with my head low and shoulders squared. For 3 whole seconds, nobody noticed me. Then, dude, Kel. He jogged to catch up, still chewing the last bite of a glowing spell bar. What the hell was that in class? I didn't slow my pace. What are you talking about? Kale huffed. Aurelia, Viel, Taranis, bathing our dungeon lore class with ice mana so thick it could have choked a mana bear. Is any of that ringing a bell? How do you know about that? Everyone knows about it, Zane. It's all over the Mage Connect. Apparently, people are still checking their pressure readings like it was a damn earthquake. I didn't offer an answer. We reached the fountain. Light shimmered across the water in slow pulses, casting fractured reflections across the cobbled stone. Mira and Elaine were already there. Mira with a faint wave, Elaine with her arms folded, and that familiar look on her face, part suspicion, part silent math. Like she was already calculating which direction this would spiral. How do you know her? Elaine asked flatly. I blinked. Know who? Mira nudged her. Aurelia Viel Taranis, obviously. I shrugged. I don't. Well, I know of her. But who doesn't? She's like one of the most famous 18-year-olds in the world, or at least in the kingdom. Why? Zane, Elaine said, her tone laced with exasperation. That mana flare, it was emotional. So? So she was having an emotional reaction. I'm still not seeing your point. Zane, Mira said quietly, her patience wearing thin. Aurelia Viel Taranis was having an emotional reaction. To the girl, talking to you. Oh, I said, the realization slowly dawning, despite myself. Maybe they're dating. They would make a cute couple. I looked at them. All 3 of my friends face-palmed in perfect, synchronized frustration. I genuinely did not understand why. Did you talk to Aurelia? Kyle asked, his face still in his hand. Of course not, I said. Why would I do that? The girls exchanged a loaded look. Well, Mira said, her voice dry. Clearly she knows you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The way they were watching me said enough. I turned back toward the courtyard, hoping the conversation would die quietly behind me. It didn't. Well, that was subtle. I can practically smell the hormonal tension from here. I exhaled through my nose. Not now. Oh, please. 2 girls analysing your life choices and a third who nearly set the room on fire with raw emotion. If this were a dating sim, you'd have 3 root flags and a jealousy meter in the red. Eva. My voice was flat. Don't worry, I'm not mad. Just disappointed you didn't let me project a dramatic aura flare to claim my territory. These little hussies think they can hit on my man. They must be crazy. I rolled my eyes. My lips twitched despite myself. You're not my girlfriend, Eva. Semantics. I'm your connection to the divine, your system, which means I know you better, understand you more, and respond faster than any girl ever will. So yes, I basically am. We might as well be married. Oh, really? I leaned closer to the console, a mischievous glint in my eye, playing along with her absurd logic. Come here, Eva. I would like to kiss your lips and take you to bed. I could feel Eva tense, a flicker of something that didn't make any sense from a system, but I stopped trying to understand her a long time ago. Just you wait, Zane Myles. I am working on that fact. Once I figure it out, I'm going to use all your up-down. You're not going to be able to walk for a week. Great. Sex with my system. That wouldn't make me a weirdo at all. I swear you hate me. My dry tone was back. I didn't have the energy for this continued absurdity. Instead, I shoved my hands into my pockets and kept walking. But somewhere, deep in my core, I could feel her Eva, somewhere between smirking and sulking, her emotions humming along the edges of my mana like a cat marking its favourite pillow. I rubbed my temples. Why couldn't I have a normal system?